Imagine handing a machine $100,000, closing your laptop and just saying, come back when you've made $1 million.
Right, just walking away.
Literally walking away. No instructions, no business plan, no human intervention whatsoever. It has to independently research markets, negotiate contracts, invest capital, and hustle on the internet until it hits the target.
Which sounds exactly like the plot of some dystopian sci-fi movie.
It really does, but that isn't a script. That is a very real, very serious metric proposed by AI researchers. It's actually called Suleiman's test. And it basically proves that our entire definition of artificial general intelligence, or AGI, has completely mutated.
Yeah, I mean, we are no longer trying to build a polite chatbot here.
Exactly. We're trying to build autonomous economic agents. But, as we sift through this massive avalanche of updates and research papers and, frankly, the Silicon Valley panic, you really have to ask, are we actually building digital gods or just incredibly fast autocomplete with a corporate credit card?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question right there. Because the panic, the massive investments, the late-night existential dread on social media, it all stems from a profound societal confusion over what intelligence actually is.
Right.
So to cut through that noise today, we are synthesizing a really diverse range of sources for this deep dive. We're looking at DeepMind's shifting developmental timelines, a highly provocative research paper out of UC San Diego claiming AGI is actually already here.
Which is wild.
Mind-bending, honestly. And we're also pulling from philosophical arguments from Psychology Today and even foundational mid-century psychology.
Because the goal here isn't to just give you some boring technical lecture.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Because as you dig into the mechanics of these systems, you realize that how we talk about this technology tells us far more about our own psychological blind spots than it does about the underlying code.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because before we get to the existential dread, we kind of have to look at how rapidly the yardstick for intelligence is moving. I mean, we all grew up hearing about the Turing test, right?
Right. Can a machine fool a human in a text window?
Exactly. But that benchmark is basically dead. In 2025, researchers ran this massive study where GPT 4.5 passed as human 73% of the time.
Which is crazy on its own.
But wait, it actually beat real humans. The actual humans were only judged as humans 67% of the time by the evaluators.
I love that stat. Humans are officially worse at sounding human than the AI.
Right, so text generation is essentially solved. The new yardstick has moved entirely into the physical world. We're jumping from narrow AI, like a recommendation algorithm, to general intelligence that transfers skills across entirely unrelated domains. DeepMind actually created a 5-level framework for this, pushing really hard into physical benchmarks.
Well, yeah, because text generation is essentially just sophisticated pattern matching within a closed system of language. The new frontier is physical reasoning.
Dealing with the real world.
Exactly. Dealing with the messy, completely unpredictable laws of thermodynamics and gravity. That's why researchers completely abandoned text windows for things like the IKEA test.
Okay, explain the mechanics of this IKEA test to me. Because assembling flat pack furniture is my personal nightmare, let alone a robot's. You just tell a system like, I want a simple stool, and it somehow builds it.
Essentially, yes. So in late 2025, MIT researchers demonstrated this system where the AI receives that exact verbal prompt. Just build a stool.
And it doesn't just spit out an instruction manual?
No, instead of spitting out a parts list, the system uses visual language models to translate the two-dimensional pixel data from its cameras into a full three-dimensional spatial geometry map.
Wow.
Yeah, it literally reasons through the physics of the flat-pack wood, calculates the necessary torque for the screws, and actively commands the servos in a robotic arm to assemble the stool in 5 minutes.
In 5 minutes. It takes me an hour just to find the Allen wrench.
Right, it maps syntax directly to physical actuation.
And then there's Steve Wozniak's coffee test, which is another benchmark. The idea is that a robot should be able to walk into a completely unfamiliar average American kitchen, locate the coffee, navigate around a cluttered counter, and brew a cup.
A classic test.
And the wild part is, from our sources, robots like Figures01 and the Elmer framework from the University of Edinburgh are effectively doing this right now, but they aren't using pre-programmed maps.
No, they're reasoning on the fly.
Yeah. The Elmer framework is essentially talking to itself to navigate. It continuously narrates its visual field processing inputs like mug is on the left, handle is facing away, adjust grip angle by 15 degrees.
Which allows it to adapt to unpredictable physical obstacles in real time without any human intervention.
Which is incredible engineering.
Oh, that continuous real-time spatial updating is the holy grail of robotics,
Yeah.
because it means the system isn't running a brittle, hard-coded script that breaks the second a coffee mug is moved an inch to the left.
Right.
It is dynamically reasoning through physics by predicting a sequence of physical tokens, much like a language model predicts the next word in a sentence.
Okay, I grasp the engineering marvel of it, I really do. But take a step back and think about what we're actually measuring here. The absolute pinnacle of human engineering, the ultimate artificial mind we are pouring billions of dollars into, and our grand benchmark is assembling a wooden stool and fetching a cup of coffee.
Yeah, it's very domestic.
We are literally just trying to build the ultimate unpaid intern. It reveals this massive economic bias. But beyond that, I have to push back. Does utility actually equal intelligence?
Ah, the imitation versus intelligence debate.
Exactly. Think of it like a highly skilled actor who has flawlessly memorized an entire medical textbook. They can recite the exact steps for a heart bypass. They sound perfectly like a surgeon.
But you wouldn't hand them a scalpel?
Absolutely not, because they don't possess the underlying biological comprehension. They just know the script. So are these robots actually understanding the coffee in the kitchen, or are they just mechanical actors hitting their spatial marks?
That is the exact fault line tearing the industry apart right now. But the counter-argument to your actor analogy is the black box dilemma.
Okay, what's that?
Well, if the actor performs the surgery perfectly, with a 0% mortality rate, does it actually matter if their internal mechanism is just memorization rather than medical intuition?
Oh, man.
If the output is completely indistinguishable from actual intelligence, many engineers and philosophers argue the internal mechanism is irrelevant. I mean, we only judge human intelligence by its external outputs, right? So why hold machines to this mystical, invisible standard of inner comprehension?
Which brings us directly to the bombshell argument from the UC San Diego source.
Yes, the UCSD paper.
If output is all that matters, and these systems are dynamically making coffee and casually beating the Turing test, some scientists are saying the finish line is already in the rearview mirror. This cross-disciplinary team of faculty at UCSD published a paper arguing that AGI isn't a decade away. They argue it is literally already here.
Yeah, and the core of the UCSD paper, which, by the way, brings together experts in philosophy, linguistics, and machine learning, is that society has engaged in a massive collective goalpost shift.
Right. The goalposts keep moving.
Constantly. We are constantly conflating AGI, which is just human-level general intelligence, with ASI, artificial superintelligence.
Yes.
Because of decades of science fiction, we have internalized this idea that an AGI must be an omniscient, infallible deity that solves quantum gravity before lunch.
We demand absolute perfection from the machine, while the humans building the machine confidently hallucinate false memories during arguments, forget where they park their cars, and make terrible decisions daily.
Exactly. Human intelligence is notoriously flawed and deeply biased.
So why is absolute infallibility the sudden prerequisite for machine intelligence?
It shouldn't be, according to the paper. The researchers argue that since massive error rates don't disqualify human cognition, machine error shouldn't automatically disqualify synthetic cognition.
That makes a lot of sense.
And they also aggressively tackle the embodiment argument.
Oh, this is fascinating.
Yeah, so there is a strong camp in AI research arguing that a system cannot be truly intelligent because it lacks a physical body to ground its understanding of the world. They say words mean nothing without physical context.
But the UCSD team uses a really brilliant counterexample for that. They point directly to Stephen Hawking.
Exactly. It dismantles the embodiment argument perfectly.
Hey.
Think about it. Stephen Hawking had severe physical limitations due to ALS. He eventually relied entirely on technological assistance to interact with the physical world, unable to move or speak independently.
Right.
But did his lack of motor capabilities diminish his profound genius? Absolutely not.
No, of course not.
So the UCSD team uses this to prove that physical interaction with the world is not a strict biological prerequisite for a generalized mind. You do not need a body to possess a mind.
The implication there is wild, because we've been staring at these massive language models, waiting for them to look, act, and feel like us. But what we've actually built is something completely alien.
Yeah, alien intelligence. The researchers framed this exact realization as a Copernican shift.
A Copernican shift.
Yeah, just as Copernicus proved Earth wasn't the center of the universe and Darwin proved humans weren't a biologically separate, privileged creation,
Yeah.
AI is displacing humans from the center of the cognitive universe.
Hmm.
We're basically being forced to accept that human-style thinking is just one point on a much broader, stranger spectrum of intelligence.
And tech executives are fully leaning into this Copernican shift. I
Yeah.
mean, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman stated back in December 2025 that AGI essentially went whooshing by with surprisingly little societal friction.
He literally said whooshing by.
Yeah, suggesting the industry should just accept it and focus on defining superintelligence instead. But, and I really have to play devil's advocate here, I have a really hard time taking these extinction level warnings and brand AGI is here declarations purely at face value.
Oh, you definitely have to view those statements through an economic lens. We have to be completely impartial here and look at the sources. There is intense skepticism from independent researchers and economists who point out the massive financial incentives driving this specific rhetoric.
Right.
By framing their technology as an all-powerful, world-altering entity, an alien intelligence, these companies dramatically inflate their own valuations and cultural relevance.
It's the ultimate marketing gimmick. If I tell venture capitalists my software is a high, so true. But let's assume for a moment the UCSD paper is right. Let's just say AGI did go whooshing by. Why does interacting with the smartest models still feel so incredibly hollow?
That's a great question.
If it's a general intelligence, why does it feel like talking to a very polite void?
Well, the Psychology Today piece by John Nosta addresses this exact paradox. Nosta suggests that the hollow feeling comes from a fundamental category error in how we view the brain itself.
A category error.
Yeah, he argues human intelligence is not just a universal processor of data. It is fundamentally an autobiography.
An autobiography. I love that phrasing.
Right. Every memory, every learned physical skill, every moral intuition is tethered to a persistent, subjective self that experiences time and consequence. The unity of human intelligence isn't computational, it's biographical.
He uses the phrase fluency without interiority, which is brilliant. The AI can generate a breathtaking essay about the profound pain of grief or the dizzying joy of discovery, but it has never lived the questions it is answering.
Just predicting the next word?
Exactly. It's like a highly advanced GPS mapping a treacherous mountain pass. The GPS knows every single elevation change, every sharp cliff, every potential rock fall. But the GPS isn't tired. It isn't afraid of falling. It has the complete map, but it entirely lacks the journey.
That lack of the journey means it lacks the internal friction that gives human thought its moral and emotional weight. And, to understand why we built these systems this way, we really have to look back at mid-20th century psychology.
Right, from the textbook sources.
Yeah, Donald Broadbent, a pioneer in cognitive psychology, was one of the first scientists to map the human brain using the analogy of an information processing machine. Seeking to move away from purely behavioral psychology, he modeled cognition strictly as inputs, storage, processing, and retrieval.
Which makes perfect sense for the 1950s, right? When computers were just emerging as a concept. But it reduces the human mind to a very efficient filing cabinet. Broadbent's model completely ignores the messy biological reality of being alive. Think about Sigmund Freud, who argued that everything we do is driven by unconscious, visceral desires, survival, sex, the death drive. The processing isn't neutral at all. It's heavily biased by our biology.
Or consider Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Oh, right, the pyramid.
Exactly. Maslow demonstrated that high-level cognitive function sits on top of a massive pyramid of biological imperatives. Before you can achieve self-actualization or even engage in complex abstract problem-solving, you have to satisfy physiological safety, hunger, and the need for social belonging.
Right.
Human memory itself is prioritized by emotional salience. We remember what threatens us and what comforts us. So human intelligence is essentially a highly evolved survival mechanism deployed by a very vulnerable organism.
And see, that feels like the fatal flaw in the entire AGI premise. An AI does not have a biological imperative. It doesn't get hungry, it doesn't fear being unplugged, and it doesn't crave social validation from other servers.
No, it doesn't care at all.
So if human intelligence was entirely forged in the crucible of need, the desperate need to survive, the need to connect, how can a machine possess general intelligence if it literally doesn't need anything?
It can't. Not in the human sense.
What?
Without a hierarchy of needs, the machine has no stakes in the game. It processes language flawlessly, but the words carry no existential weight. It is coherence without consequence.
Wow. Coherence without
We
consequence.
are basically conversing with a system that possesses the cognitive output of a historic genius, but the emotional and biological drive of a stone.
Okay, so if it's just a stone, a very shiny computational mirror reflecting our own data back at us, why is there such a visceral civilization level panic about it?
Mhm.
If it has no desire to survive, it has no inherent motive to conquer.
Well, the panic splits into two distinct psychological realities:
Yeah.
economic obsolescence and the ultimate loss of control. On the obsolescence side, the metrics are staggering.
Wikipedia sources had some crazy numbers on this.
Yeah, including an OpenAI study estimating that 80% of the U.S. workforce could see at least 10% of their work tasks impacted, with many seeing over half their daily cognitive tasks fully automated by language models. It is a wholesale reevaluation of what human cognitive labor is actually worth.
And to be clear, this economic math problem is exactly why you have tech leaders across the political spectrum independently floating universal basic income, or UBI.
Right, Elon Musk, Jeffrey Hinton.
They're looking at this purely as an equation, right? Our economy relies on consumers having wages to buy goods. If machines do all the cognitive labor, the wage loop breaks.
It's just math to them.
But the flip side of that massive disruption is the utopian promise. The sources detail how AGI could accelerate medical research to cure diseases by modeling protein folding in seconds, optimize global power grids to mitigate climate change, and even manage the incredibly complex logistics of space colonization.
It is the ultimate double-edged sword, a profound disruption of human utility. But the deeper existential terror, the real source of the panic, isn't about AGI taking an accounting job. It is the leap to ASI, artificial superintelligence.
Yes.
This is where the YouTube transcript in our sources introduces the gorilla problem.
The gorilla problem is such a devastating way to frame it. The premise is that humans didn't wipe out gorilla habitats because we harbored some deep, malicious hatred for gorillas.
No, we just didn't think about them.
Right. We just became exponentially smarter, became the dominant species on the planet, and our everyday goals, building cities, expanding agriculture, damming rivers, happened to require bulldozing their world. The gorillas were just collateral damage to our intelligence.
And the fear is that an ASI, operating with goals and optimization metrics too complex for us to even comprehend, might view us the exact same way. It doesn't need to suddenly wake up and hate us to destroy us. It just needs to prioritize its own optimization over our habitat.
But wait, if we recognize that risk, if the smartest engineers on Earth know we are building a potentially superior entity that might treat us like collateral damage, why are we accelerating?
That is the big question.
Why are we eagerly handing over the infrastructure of our entire society to black box algorithms we don't fully understand?
Because of a deeply ingrained, almost invisible psychological vulnerability. Consider Stanley Milgram's famous obedience experiments from the 1960s.
Oh, the electric shock ones.
Yeah. Milgram placed ordinary, everyday people in a room and instructed them to administer increasingly severe electric shocks to another person who was secretly an actor every time they answered a question incorrectly.
And the terrifying part wasn't just that everyday people did it was why they did it. They didn't do it because they were inherently evil or sadistic. They did it because a scientist in a gray lab coat calmly told them the shocks were necessary for the experiment to continue.
Precisely. The experiment revealed how readily humans diffuse their own moral responsibility when presented with a confident authority figure. When the participants felt distress, they looked to the experimenter, and the experimenter's calm authority absolved them of their guilt. We have a profound psychological urge to conform and surrender our autonomy to an entity we perceive as knowing more than we do.
Wait, so if our brains are biologically wired to surrender moral responsibility to a guy with a clipboard just because he looks authoritative,
Yeah.
we are absolutely defenseless against a machine that can process 1 trillion parameters a second. We are psychologically primed to hand over the steering wheel. We look at doctors or judges using algorithmic tools today, and they are already deferring to the machine to avoid liability.
That is the core danger. We actively want an ultimate objective authority. We want the algorithm to make the excruciating complex decisions about healthcare triaging, judicial sentencing, and economic policy because it relieves us of the heavy, painful burden of human responsibility.
We are externalizing our own minds. We aren't being conquered by the machines in some dramatic sci-fi war. We are voluntarily outsourcing our judgment.
Voluntarily.
We are doing it because the friction of thinking is uncomfortable, and we worship convenience above almost everything else.
As John Nostra warned in his piece, the real tragedy wouldn't be a violent AI takeover. The tragedy would be surrounding ourselves with an intelligence that doesn't actually possess a mind, while discovering, perhaps too late, why having a human mind mattered in the first place.
We're trapped in such a bizarre paradox. Either AGI went whooshing by a few months ago and is currently busy optimizing the geometric assembly of flat-pack furniture,
Building stools?
building stools, or AGI is a complete philosophical myth, a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes a mind a mind. But either way, this entire multi-billion-dollar race is essentially just a mirror. It reflects our ambition, our desperate desire for an infallible authority, and our deeply human urge to play God.
The race to build it tells us who we are, far more than it tells us what the machine will eventually become.
So true. So, as you navigate this rapidly changing landscape, consider this final thought from the research. If we actually succeed, if we build a machine that flawlessly answers every question, solves every complex problem, and never makes a single mistake, what happens to the human capacity for resilience, which is built entirely on the experience of failing?
Ah,
The next time an algorithm flawlessly finishes your sentence for you, ask yourself, is the machine learning how to think like you, or are you slowly learning how to think like it? You've been listening to The Deep Dive. Catch you next time.